What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Door. This is Behind the Door Sniffles and Cough edition because both Jeremy and I are a little bit under the weather, but you know what? We're dedicated to getting these stories out, having these conversations. It's coming out for you, it's lingering for me, but we appreciate you guys listening in. And, um, to introduce this episode, I'm just going to give a little bit of context that everybody who's listening who is impacted by our criminal legal system and everybody who's listening who's impacted by, addiction or our mental health systems, if you're in recovery, no matter what space you occupy, if you've been impacted by our systems in this country, we've talked about on previous episodes that one thing that you become almost accustomed to and sometimes even numb to is like loss, right? And struggle, because it's just you struggle when you're in the system, you struggle when you're out of the system, you struggle to heal from the system, you struggle not to resent the system, all these things. And one thing that Jeremy and I have talked about and tried to be really vulnerable in this space with is like, man, we lose a lot of fucking people. And recently, we lost somebody in our community who was also a really pivotal part of the Recovery Connections of Maine. And, this very specific community, but also the broad community, well connected and well known. And, I'll let you talk about it a little bit. But what I really wanted to name is in the conversations I've been having with my friends and people I consider family and people that have been affected by this loss is that people are like, we really thought he was doing good. We didn't know that he was struggling. And it brought up a lot of things for me about how do you support somebody when their struggle is completely silent? But then also for myself, I related to it because like I do that. When I'm really struggling the most, it's something I try to hide. I don't want people to know it, but it's when I need the most support. And so what lessons can we kind of take from yet another loss that we've had? But I really want to turn it over to you, Jeremy, just to, maybe give some words about Aaron and just talk about what you've seen, and the reaction in the community and how these things are relevant to making sure that we're supporting people even when it looks like everything's going right for them.
Yeah, I think it's hard to put ourselves in this position where we feel responsible to be there to support people through things, right? Because what I know is that we all we do make choices. We do have autonomy to do that, to make these mistakes and do things and not reach out and not say anything and like we also have to accept sometimes the role that we do actually play in some people's lives. I know for me this is very I've seen like you were saying like I've seen it a lot. You know what I mean over the last I don't know, month, 2 months, two people that I was very close with and I grew up with and that I know were impacted by the system were murdered. One of them was murdered by his best friend. And then we experienced this. And in every one of those cases, I know that all those guys, they probably had an opportunity to not be doing what they were doing. And sometimes it's like, what do you do to hold on to that? You know what I mean? Can you do anything? I think the thing that we struggle with the most is it's such a powerless situation in some ways, right? It's like like we become powerless to it. And that is when we become so rattled by it is I think because we are so, um, you know, I've seen communities very, very strong. I actually believe our community became stronger in the wake of it. And I saw the community come together really, really tightly around it, and they support each other and they help each other through the grief and loss process, right? But at the like we, um, we can be there and provide the energy and all that stuff, and we can do everything 100% correct, and people are still going to die. And like that is what is hard, I think, to accept in a lot of ways. That's what's hard for me to accept. It's what we to fight for. We don't want anybody to die, right? But the reality is that like this is the situation that we're in. Is that like not everybody is going to make it, and the powerlessness of it is that um, we can be there and support people, and we can do that. But if they don't say anything, like we can't read people's minds.
I think that's something that's really hit me hard too, is like, what you're saying is an absolute truth, is that no matter how perfect a program is, no matter how strong a community is, no matter how many resources we have available to people, we cannot save everybody. And the goal is to always save one more person and then one more person. But I can tell you, man, that what I've really been thinking about too, just, in relation to what you're saying, in relation to what happened recently, is like, I've really like had to look in the mirror a little bit, and because when somebody passes away, and you realize that, like, man, I thought things were going good, especially if it's like an overdose or a suicide, or, anything like that. When it seemed on the surface like things were going good, I think that's when people really feel the most shock and confusion about it. And, looking at myself in the mirror these last couple weeks, I've also realized, like, when things are going really bad for me personally, I don't know how to ask people for help, because I don't want people to know that things are going really bad. I don't wanna seem weak, or I don't want to, um I don't know how to ask somebody to show up for me, because for so long in prison, I didn't really have that option to ask people to show up for me. I just had to cherish every time somebody did. But it really woke me up recently to think that, like, I've had a lot of shit going wrong in my life lately. I've been, like, sick for 3 weeks. I've been having some, like, relationship and friendship issues, and I've really isolated in my house and not wanted to go out and not wanted to text people or call people, and it's like every day that I've done that, I've gone a little bit deeper and darker, and when this all happened, it made me realize, like, man, I really gotta learn how to ask for help and tell somebody, like, "I know it looks like things are good, but I'm fucked up." And I think that's also a sign of having a really healthy, positive community around you, is when you have people that you trust, that you can say that. But like you said, it's also, I'm the only one with the power to do it, right? Like, no matter how amazing everybody around me is, I have some of the most amazing people in the world in my corner, in my community. But I'm the only one who can actually say, I'm not okay. And, for me, I wonder if, with you and your community and the work that you do, and, with some of these losses that we've had recently, is how do you, like, how do you work with somebody to get them to that point where they really start internalizing that it's okay to not be okay?
Well, I think that comes from shared experiences. You know what I mean? I think that's why, like, the 12-step community and recovery communities and things like that, you relate to people. I think it's easier. I want to say the term easier because I've been in places and you know what I mean, like the same thing. Like we isolate, and that's where I was. Trauma is like isolates us. You know what I mean? The feeling depressed tells us no one wants us around and no one wants to be, you know what I'm saying? Like we've talked about this exact feeling before, right? And so we don't feel like people believe that we don't believe that people actually want to hear what we have to say at times. And so I can totally relate to that piece of it, right? But I think what's been easier for me and what I've seen, it's been easier for a lot of other people is when I'm feeling good, is to continue to foster those relationships like I'm feeling bad. Not like I'm feeling bad, but like continue to like because that when that time comes, it's coming back. It's coming again. You know what I'm saying? It's like I know for a fact for me it's coming back, but like what's easier for me now is I can lessen the severity of the symptoms. I don't have to act on it. I don't have to stay stuck in it as long. There's periods of time where it's better at times than it is in the you know what I'm saying, like all that stuff, but like knowing being aware of it and understanding it. But understanding it to the fact, like, I have to be like, I don't have to call people all the time and tell them like all my problems. I can call people up and shoot the shit with them and like and laugh with them and talk about the Celtics or something like that. And, like you just have an established relationship with friends. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's not like when I need to talk to somebody. I'm not saying that you do it at 2 in the morning, but you know what I mean? At that moment when you're vulnerable and your phone feels like 1,000 pounds, that's the time that like it's gonna be less, it's gonna be only 200 pounds instead of 1,000 pounds, right? It's not gonna be as hard because I have an existing relationship with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's such an important thing to really think about for each of us, like, um, how do we because I think, like, for myself and a lot of people I know, I focus so much on how I show up for other people. How do I ensure that I'm showing up for somebody when I can tell that they need me, and how do I ensure that I make myself available to people? And then what I've done in my life is I've almost internalized at times that, like, I'm this person for so many people and I don't feel like I have that, which is, like, super crazy because I know that I do. And I think what happens sometimes, especially if you're doing work or you're volunteering or you're just in a friend group where, like, you play that role for people, it's a lot of times the person that plays that role the most is the person who will find it the hardest to seek out that role because they feel like, "I gotta be strong, I'm that person." And I've seen this with a lot of people that we've lost that are like, it's so shocking to us because it's like, man, that person seemed like everything was good and they were always the person that people could go to.
Well, I think what happens, Brandon, sometimes is people like say, I don't know how many times if you're a system impact and you've had multiple encounters with the prison system or probation and you have a substance use disorder. Um, so Aaron's like our age, say like he's like 45, I would say, right? So, you know what I mean? Or maybe like he's in this area, right? But like he grew up and like a lot of us had grown up in an era where like substance use disorder is like you got penalized for it, right? For getting high or like I got 18 months for smoking weed at one point. You know what I mean? And it was the first time I ever had a job in my life was when I got and so um how many times do you get off probation and you fail and you end up immediately back in? I know that some people struggle with like the restrictions are off, right? I feel like even though people look at me like I'm doing well, the fear of failing becomes so prevalent. It's like when is the other shoe gonna drop? You know what I'm saying? They're gonna come and they're coming in to lock me up at any moment. You know what I mean? They're gonna and like if you've experienced that a few different times in your life, and then you're going through the same type of transition, um, a lot of us are able to look great on the outside. You know what I'm saying? I was shooting 10 grams of hair every day, but I had a haircut. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, I made sure that I looked good on the outside, that was the number one thing, right? And so, what I'm trying to get at is I think we need to normalize that fear. It needs to be, like, literally like, it's okay to feel this fear of failing when you're transitioning through, when these restrictions are coming off and all that stuff, even though it looks that way. Um, that, just looking at it back, throughout my career, my experience around some of this stuff is, that's probably the most high risk time in somebody's, transition into the community is getting off probation and legal restrictions. That's when it goes south for a lot of people.
No, you're 100% right about that. I mean, I've had that conversation with a lot of people is like, because a couple things happens. Number one, you get this like you almost become triggered with anxiety about what am I gonna do without the rules and the structure and the fear.
And normal people don't understand that. And not I would say normal people, but the general, like just general people you meet don't they don't understand that. Like,
Yeah.
You go into a restaurant, you're like, oh, I feel everybody knows I'm on probation. I just got out of prison. Like that's the type of feeling that people don't understand. Like they feel you feel like you stick out like a sore thumb, but you actually don't. You know what I mean?
No, nobody would know. And it's like this thing where when you're finally completely free is like, if you haven't been for so long, you don't know what to do with it. It's like it's almost like the pressure of it, the amount of possibilities, both negative and positive, is something that just starts to kind of like eat away at you because you're like, I don't know how to confront this feeling because I've never actually felt it. Right. Like, especially most people encounter the system and then they're in and out, in and out, in and out. And it's not in and out in periods of freedom, it's in and out in periods of supervision and structure. And, I'm on probation or I'm out on bail or I'm in prison, all these things, and then one day it hits you,
Looking over your shoulder.
and it's like that pressure and that
I can do
anxiety.
that. We can do that.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? I can get a little relief from
yeah,
this. I can get little relief in
and it's
just 1
almost
second. You
in
know what I'm
some
saying?
ways, it's almost too like, it's almost like it serves as like a fuck you to the system, like, I wasn't able to get this relief or do whatever, do this and that for the longest time because you wouldn't let me, not because I shouldn't, it's because you wouldn't let me, you told me it was bad, and even though we know that some of the things we do are unhealthy, there is that voice inside that's like, I'm not gonna lose my whole life for this one little thing, without realizing that the little thing might be the thing that spirals.
I don't necessarily like, it may not be, like, so overt, like, after system. I think it's like, geez, I've been just, like, craving that, like, the substance use disorder is triggered through the uncomfortable feelings, right? And it's like, man, I just need a little relief right now, right? And then like the most dangerous time is that time because if I haven't the substances that are on this, there is no cocaine anymore. It's all fentanyl, carfentanil, xylazine. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not. Those drugs are not. There's not. There is no. I haven't. It's been years since I've seen heroin or a drug test. I do. You look at drug tests all the time, right? There's somebody's taking a drug and they think it's. They say, all right, I say, what do you do? Oh, it's cocaine, but there's 18, 19 different drugs: xylazine, carfentanil, fentanyl. You're saying some. But Molly's, you could get some that's primarily methamphetamine, some more fentanyl based, more carfentanil, but you literally don't know. So like you think about that for a second. Somebody's been in recovery for a little while, and then the legal stuff comes off. And then, but that fear is not being addressed, right? Because I'm fearful of talking about that fear. You know what I'm saying? Or like if I also now have this fear, but I don't necessarily want to admit that because I am helping people out or because I am like doing this or you know what I'm saying? It's like the mental aspect of it is like unseen, the thoughts that are unseen that like can't be picked up on that are like in the back of our minds. You know what I'm saying? That like the constant like, oh, am I gonna fit in? Am I gonna succeed at this? Everybody's gonna fucking hate me. I'm gonna fuck this up. They're not gonna. The background checks coming back, and they're gonna kick me out of the job. Like they don't actually want me. Like all those types of things, right? Those types of evasive thoughts, and then like. All right, okay. They're not looking. No one's looking right now.
Quiet for a
Just give me fucking just one night. Right, in that one night, the type of drugs right now, it's not we just it's like literally Russian roulette.
Well, it could be the last night or it could be the first night of a very long, painful journey because like you said, you don't know what that thinking of, "Oh, I just need something to cope."
And that's the other side of it, Brandon, is that the power of the drugs, the reason why these drugs are so addictive is because 'cause they're so powerful, right? That the addiction becomes so intense early on. You could be, literally in withdrawals after 2 or 3 uses of the same drug. Right? So say you that now you think about this, you get some drugs one night, you get high off the drugs, you got a little bit left for the morning time, and then you just do it in the morning time, right? And now by the end of the next day, you're already feeling off. You're already feeling so what do? Okay, now it's in the brain. And now the brain is gonna say, okay, I just a little bit more, you got away with it, no one's looking at you. We're gonna be good now.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too, just because like, to even expand it beyond that, like, that's just like that reward, that internal reward system works that way even when it's not with something that you become physically dependent on, when you can become
Yeah.
emotionally dependent on
Everything,
something. And
food, cigarettes, gambling, like, video games, the
so
whole thing.
it's interesting to talk about because just in the context too of like, when people are doing really good, especially when you have a sustained period of like feeling like you're doing really good and everybody on the outside knows you're doing really good. And then when that thing happens, that thought creeps in, that freedom happens, whatever it is, like when you've trained yourself for a long time that, you know, how you cope with something is through some type of like reward based system. It could be anything that is, that kind of that starts the spiral because it could be sex, it could be cigarettes, it could be a drink, it could be that I didn't even want to do fentanyl, I just want to do a little line of cocaine, but next thing you know, that cocaine has this other shit in it, and now I need it, and like it's just interesting to
Now I'm dead,
yeah, well, yeah, and that's
right?
what I
Like,
mean.
it doesn't, it's over, and that's, like, really, like, okay, so what are we really dealing with? We're really dealing with the fear that comes first, and that's what we have to be reaching out about to our friends about. That's what we have to talk about, because if we don't cut it off there,
Yeah.
it's gonna get to the other side. So the more we isolate, the more of a chance we have to go, "Oh, I just need a little relief. I'm gonna get away with this." You know
And
what
we
I mean?
need to replace, like some of the negative reward systems that we have with more positive, natural, like I'll just personalize it for me. It's never about drugs. It's about like I spend time with shitty, toxic fucking people. And we've talked about this because at least I can predict what's gonna happen in a moment of loneliness. Like I know I shouldn't spend time with this person. It's gonna be fucking drama, it's gonna be this and that, but in that 2 hours, I'm not lonely, and the next day, my whole life comes crashing down, and I knew better, but I really just wanted to not feel this way right now, and so, like, a lot of times, like we're talking about is, like, people, even if it's not drug addiction, even if it's not alcoholism, will engage in, like, damaging and detrimental behaviors to cover up a negative feeling because I personally haven't established a positive coping mechanism for a negative feeling, right? And, like, I've made decisions, like, where I live affects me, how far away I am from my community affects me, like, so many different little things become the excuses why I'm like, I could do this positive thing, but that's gonna take way more effort than this negative thing, and the negative thing is gonna take more effort long term, but it's gonna get me the result that I want right now. And it's like, you're bringing up such good points about the bigger picture of it is like, we really got to retrain ourselves to number one, identify and recognize a really shitty, dark moment, no matter how good we're doing in life the moment before. And when that moment comes, to actually have a whole kind of like almost roll call of positive options that we say before we get to whatever the negative one is. Even if we think it makes us look weak, even if we think it's not gonna solve the problem right away, being able to identify that like my long-term happiness and survival matters, and I need to engage with my positive outlets versus retreating into myself until I'm engaging with a negative one. And I can see it. I can see it in so many people in so many different ways. I can see it in myself. And, sometimes it takes like the most drastic version of that happening to really turn on the light bulb for us that, like, fuck, we got like we got to make these changes for each other, for ourselves. You know what I mean? And, but you're right. We'll never be able to save everybody, and all we can do, and this has become really apparent to me recently, is really try hard to save ourselves.
Right. And, we have to be there for people. We provide opportunity, right? Like, you want somebody to talk to, I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to do whatever I can to help you. But, like, I can't own anybody else's decision. It's like you're struggling with this type of thing. Somebody's passed away and you're struggling with, oh, how could I have done something differently? What I have done a long time ago is I made a commitment to myself that, like, I am going to have tough conversations with people when I see it,
Yeah.
or when I feel it, or when, like, something's coming up, like, it's gonna be because I don't want to go oh, I wish I would have said something, but I was afraid I was gonna hurt his feelings, or like I was afraid it was gonna get uncomfortable. I didn't want to believe it and all that stuff. What I know now is that like I know the relationship that I had with him, and I know what he knew was available to him. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, he you make a decision that like that you can't come. And he's not a bad guy for it. I love him. You know what I'm saying? But you know what I'm saying. And I wish that he would have done something differently, but he didn't. You know what I'm saying? I didn't. No one. Everybody was gonna be there for him, and no one could have done anything. I don't believe. I look back on everything that's happened for him. I was like, you know what I mean? Like it's you like. And that's our own immortality, you know what I'm saying? That we have to like, we don't know what's gonna happen for us, and it's like so right now, it's like, man, I wanna be focused on the people in my life that you know, the gratitude that you have for the people around you that, like, are, going to make it, and understand that, like, more people will make it through this thing than won't, you know what I'm saying? More people will recover than are not. That's by a landslide, you know what I'm saying? So it's important. That's another important thing to remember too, is that there's hope for other people. Just because, you know what I mean? Like this person's battle ended tragically, like it doesn't mean that everybody's is. You know what I'm
No,
saying?
100%. And when I hear you say that, it's funny because like the first thought that I had was that like I wanted to tell everybody who's listening, everybody who's supporting the podcast, everybody who's tuning in to like, what I hope you take away from this episode is that like it's okay to reach out and ask for help. But you know what I realized when I was thinking that? Like really that's what I want to tell myself. Like because what I've realized in the last couple weeks thinking about us losing another person in our community who seemed like everything was going great, what it really made me realize is like, damn, I'm that fucking person too. Where when I'm struggling, I don't let anybody know, and that's on me. And that's what I've realized. I had a conversation with somebody I really love recently, and they were like, "Bro, your friends and your family can't read your mind. If they don't know that you want them to do A, B, and C, how are you gonna be mad at them for not doing it?" And when he the way he told me, he was like a really good friend of mine from when I was young, and I'm only connected to a few of those people, but he was just brutally real with me. He was like, "Brandon, if you're going through a fucking hard time and I don't know, you're so good at covering it up, I can't show up for you." And, then hearing about Aaron and, just hearing people's reactions, what I really hope other people who are listening, who knew Aaron, people, if you have lost somebody that seemed like they had the whole world by the balls and that things were going right, and especially if that person has struggled in life and now they're finally figuring it out, if you lost a person at that moment, what I hope that you take away from this episode is the recognition that we cannot get help if we don't ask for it. And like what I'm taking away from this conversation and what I hope that I can start implementing in my life tomorrow, if not tonight, is like when I'm messed up, I gotta tell somebody I'm messed up. Because even though my life not might be at risk today to like overdose or I might not feel like my life is at risk to commit suicide or whatever. What my life is at risk at is like crawling deeper into the hole to the point where it feels like I'll never get out of it because I couldn't say I'm not okay.
Yeah, I also think it's very, very important to say that we owe it to our loved ones to do that, right? Like when you think about, you take yourself out of that, people um, become left in your wake. You know what I'm saying? And it's important that like if I have these people that we and there's moments we make these decisions, and we feel like no one's I'm gonna get away with it and no one's gonna know, and like all this stuff, and then it's life changing for people in our lives. I don't think sometimes we realize the importance that we play in other people's lives, like how important we really are. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that I think people need to. That's why we reach out. It's not always for us; it's for the people that love us.
And there's an irony too that I'm recognizing in this conversation is that how many of us have kept shitty people around who never show up for us in a moment of need, but specifically because we've never actually narrated the need. And so when we think about wanting to have positive people around us and wanting to have people that consistently show up versus people who don't, how can you know who's who if you don't actually ask? And that's something that I'm dealing with too, and that you just made me think of is like, if I've got 100 people in my life and I don't ever ask any of them for help, how do I know who will show up when I need it? Because I might have 20 I need to weed out, but I'm not gonna know I need to weed them out until I say, "Hey, I need you." And then the 80 that show up when I need them, that's my community. We've talked about that before too, and, I hope, man, that this episode is a beginning of honoring Aaron and, like, showing up for people who are feeling this loss, and really just showing up for people who are feeling loss in general. But equally, if not more importantly, like, for me, and I hope for some people listening, this episode is really a signal that, like, if you're struggling, you gotta say you're struggling out loud to somebody that is dependable. That's the only option. You're not gonna be able to figure everything else out on your own. You're not gonna be able to heal on your own. You're not gonna be able to solve every problem on your own. And you're not gonna be able to come out of a dark moment every time alone. And so that's what I really hope people take away, man. And, I always just thank you for, being able to talk about these things and give so much wisdom about them to people and to me also just as your friend and your co-host. Like, these conversations just really help me, man. Yeah.